What's gay got to do with it? I know I'm paraphrasing the song title, but I just couldn't resist. The issues of members of the LGBTQ plus community are more relevant than you might think. And we're going to talk about some of those issues and questions. We're going to talk about it in the context of a new book. The book is called Money Proud: The Queer Guide to Generate Wealth, Slay Debt, and Build Good Habits to Secure Your Future. Nick Wolny is the author. He is in Long Beach, California today. Hello there, Nick.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I gotta say, when I was pitched this book, I was like, I don't know. What's really different? I've been in this space a long time. I've been gay even longer. What's the intersection? What's relevant? You have made a very compelling case here. And so I'm going to ask you a very broad, open ended question. What's different for a queer audience? Is it content that this book does differently? Is it context?
I'd say it's both. When I get trolled, which is happening more often now that the book is out, it's really exciting. People say, well, you know what? How is money different for queer people? How is
Yeah.
money different? It's just money. It's paper with green ink on it, right? And the money itself is not what's different, but our lives are different. Our stressors are different. The way that we are brought up is different. Just different aspects of stress in society, things like that. And also our life priorities might vary. There's not quite as much of a focus around family planning or generational wealth, some of those other things that might be more mainstream. And I also think for many people, after they have they go through that coming out process, they then have this, I call it post coming out Renaissance realness, right? Where it's like, okay, well, now that I'm out of the closet, I'm just going to express myself. I'm going to, YOLO. I'm going to do everything that I
Yeah.
want when I want to do it. I interviewed about 40 people for this book,
Wow.
and that came up as a frequent theme in terms of after they had stepped into accepting themselves and who they are and being open, out, and proud about that. There was this period of stepping into that from a spending perspective and from a lifestyle perspective and from a full self-expression perspective,
Yeah.
that if the budget's not in check, there's kind of there's a finite amount of runway on that approach. And so this book is really intended to help people find that balance and not feel like they're having to suppress themselves or hold back, but that they really can have a both and approach to personal finance.
There are so many paradoxes for the community, the LGBTQ plus community, in that there are things that are similar to all of us, like, well, have some sort of coming out story, good, bad, indifferent. And there's so many things that are so different. I mean, you put two even gay men, put them side by side. There are things that are very, very different. I, as a parent, relate, and I'm married to a dude for 26 years, relate much more strongly to my identity as a parent, not even a same sex parent, just a parent, than I do about being a gay man in these times. How did you kind of toggle between the universality of your message and the heterogeneous, to use a maybe, I don't know, a controversial word in this context, but the
Mhm.
differences that every single reader will have, both in terms of their life circumstance and also their relationship to money?
There was a decision about halfway through the manuscript writing process to go much more personality forward in this book.
Yeah.
And because, this book, I joke that this book is for anyone who wants to read it. Queer
Anyone who
people,
wants to
not queer,
what?
anyone who wants to read it. And,
Right.
queer people, not queer people, anyone
Yeah.
in between, anything like that. And so there was really this decision to be more voice forward and voice first with these explanations of the basic building blocks of personal finance. Learning about budgeting and investing 101 and taxes from the perspective of a sassy gay man. If I make
Yeah.
you feel like we're sitting together, sipping martinis on the
Yeah. Doing
patio.
a zipper snap.
Yes, while we're talking about taxes, as
Yeah.
we love doing that. If we're doing that, and you feel that way from the voice and tone of the book, then it's mission accomplished. and sprinkling along the way some of the things that people should know about queer people from a socioeconomic perspective. We're
Yeah.
more likely to have more debt. We're more likely to have less in savings. We're less likely to own a home. And when we are offered a mortgage on a home, we're typically offered a higher interest rate. All other categories held similar. And so helping people become aware of those things, but doing it in a way where it's really packaged to feel like a queer person, to
Yeah.
feel like you're talking to a queer person, and helping readers go from something they feel a little more familiar with. There's plenty of pop culture analogies, lots of other references and things like
Yeah.
that, and taking them from a place of comfortable to this topic that for a lot of people is really uncomfortable. Money
Sure.
is a really touchy topic for a lot of people,
And you
as you
you
know
use the
well.
word slay in the title. So,
Oh
let's just
yeah.
start there. Your introduction includes duties. You call them duties. Two are, consistent with almost every personal finance book I've ever read: Chart a Roadmap, Redefine Wealth. Uh-huh. The two that are um, most interesting and I think never talked about: cultivate a work life that doesn't require numbing. And finally, the duty to live a joyous queer life. I want to focus on that phrase because I love it, but
Mm.
I'm curious to know how that came to be. Why is that a duty in a personal finance book?
Well, I think that a big piece of it is figuring out that sustainability in your day-to-day life. We've got plenty of very sexy saving stories, people saving, 50%, 60%, 80% of their income, and they're eating ramen noodles every single night for dinner in order to save for the future. That does not feel very compelling in the short term, even if the
Right.
numbers are going up. And so I think for, particularly this is true for queer people, but I think this is true for everyone. You want to make sure that you're figuring out now what you really enjoy doing with your life and what you really enjoy doing with your time. That requires exploration. It requires time investment. It requires, sometimes financial investment. It requires attention investment. And
Mm,
so having the space to really explore that and to take that time and really discover who you are, what you like about yourself, what you like about the world. It's almost like doing little retirement research in a
mm,
way, so that you're going to have a better sense of what you really enjoy. Also, often it changes the trajectory of midlife and it changes the trajectory of your later years in life as well.
mm,
Perhaps you travel somewhere in the world and you're like, "Oh my goodness, I would love to be in this part of the world more
mm.
often," right? That's actually going to change some of your financial
Yeah.
planning and it's going to change some of your priorities. So I think that's really important to be
You
cultivating
also
your
you
time.
also acknowledge history, and I think this was really resonant for me as a gay man who grew up in the 80s. My ability to marry my husband and have my child is a function of the leadership of those men, women, non-binary, trans folks who advocated on our behalf decades ago. The AIDS crisis, Stonewall, all those sorts of things. And there's a real call to action that you make very explicit here. Like, you better go have a great life because of all the work that all those people did before you. You stand on their shoulders. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, often in my early adulthood, I would let the politics of the moment dictate how I felt about myself and how I felt about my life. And reading about queer history, learning about queer history, gay history, seeing what our queer ancestors is what I like to call them, seeing what they created in those times and spaces of oppression. I think that's very inspiring and interesting, and to see them be creative and to see them be fulfilled, even while they were fighting, and even while, we were quite literally dying
Mm,
at one point, and not getting the help, and not getting that medical research that we needed imminently. And so I think for me, looking to gay history and queer history is empowering. It gives information on how to live a more fulfilling life, and it gives that inspiration as well on how past generations of queer people did that and achieved that. And I think it helps to cultivate this stability and this independence that you can cultivate your life, you can create your life in the moment, even as there's a lot of bluster going on in the news
mm,
and in politics and things like that. And all of that will likely continue. So focusing on what you can control can sometimes be a mechanism to help you get out of those doom spirals
mm.
and get back into taking action and doing it in a way that supports you.
Money was not an area of strength for you. So it was not taught, modeled. You didn't come from circumstances in which this was easy. You called your relationship to money and how it evolved over the years a spiritual journey.
Mm.
What was a transformative moment for you along that journey?
I would say there was a point in my 20s where I realized I was going to have to take matters into my own hands in regard to income. I was shocked that 2 degrees in classical French horn do not make you the most employable person on the planet.
What?
That's exactly, I had the same reaction. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And so
I
afterwards,
mean,
so
the
like many,
CEO of
yes,
JP Morgan Chase was a clarinetist. So surely
yes,
for the French
yeah.
horns, that
I
should
know
have
what
led you
masters in
to
French
the
horn. Yeah.
C suite at Apple.
Exactly. Yes. There's not a huge economic uprising. It's not, it's no AI. It's not propping up
Right.
the market in the same way. And I think with the realization of that, which is also the realization that millions of young people have after they get out of college and they're initially underemployed, they're initially not utilizing that education. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to create out of this? How am I going to use these skills in a different way? And also, what are those other skills, those job getting skills, those negotiation skills, those business growth skills? I eventually became self-employed for several years. What are those other skills that allow me to take care of myself and also help me grow my career? And abandoning that path of what I think a lot of us are groomed toward in school around, you're going to go to college, you're going to get this degree, and then it's going to lead to this job, which will lead to that job. That is actually usually not how it plays out. There are other ingredients that come into the picture, other skills you have to develop along the way in whatever your line of work is. Or if you take your skills and you go into a completely different industry altogether, which is scary for a lot of people, but quite often, especially for those of us in the humanities and in the arts who
Mm,
are not in those fields anymore, art skills are very, very useful in some of
mm,
these other fields. And so just learning that sense of skill transfer, it also made me really count on myself, really bet on myself and develop confidence along the way. And
mm,
so I think that's one way it was spiritual is that it just forced me to be in truth with myself, what I know I'm good at, trusting my gut, all those things that we talk about in, executive leadership and entrepreneurship and things like that,
mm.
but also just in the day to day, relying more on myself and counting on myself has ended up being one of the best things for my career.
You reference something that you call the golden cage. What is the golden
Mm.
cage in this context?
Yeah. The golden cage is when you're in some sort of setting. It could be a corporate setting, it could be an entrepreneurial setting where you are making a lot of money, you're making good money, and expenses have risen with income, which we know is kind of going to be the default for a lot of people. And you encounter this situation where your expenses are high enough that you can't afford to leave this job that you really don't enjoy because you just have your expenses are too high. One person I interviewed he's got this gorgeous condo, but it's 60% of his take-home pay each month in order to make the condo payment. And he's like, well, yeah, I can't, they keep telling me I'm up for a promotion, but this is the third year in a row now that they've said that. And so I think that's a situation that a lot of people end up finding themselves in. And there's even a little bit of that keeping up with the Joneses theme as well, where you have to keep up appearances in order to stay at pace with that higher caliber job and things like that. And before you know it, your expenses have come up a lot, and you've locked yourself in from an expenses perspective. Happens a lot too for entrepreneurs and small business owners as well, where their overhead just goes up and up and up. And then when something comes along, like, oh, I don't know, a pandemic or something like that that
Mm.
requires agility and requires pivoting, then it can be a real challenge. And so allowing for that nimbleness, that's something that I particularly like to advocate for queer people, and to just be aware of that tendency for expenses to rise with income. That way you don't end up continuing to spend everything that you make. It's why I lead with saving rate early on in the book, defining
Mm.
saving rate for people. That way that appeals to the person who's making, a middle class income, or someone who's making an upper middle class income or even more than that. It's not actually so much about how much you're making. It's also about how much is left over at the end of the month.
Mm.
And that's actually going to be the fuel that you're going to work with for all of these different personal finance efforts.
In any conversation about anything, members of the LGBTQ plus community will be a minority when we look at the population. Like whatever the percentage is, and we don't need to debate the number, we're not 100% of the population. So for the allies out there, the parents of, the families of, the siblings of, what would you say they should understand about the queer people who they love as it relates to money that they could just be a little bit more aware of or sensitive to that might make the queer person's life a little easier?
Something I introduce early on in the book is the idea of minority stress,
Mm,
which is that when someone is different from, the other people in their environment, it results in chronic stress. And that's true for queer people. That's also true for anyone who is part of a minority group. And that what we know about chronic stress is that it can actually start to wear you down over time. It can start to change the brain over time. And it certainly wears you down in terms of things like emotional regulation and those other skills that can be important for taking care of oneself and taking care of one another. So I would say really, checking in on the queer people in your life, particularly when the news headlines are dominated with anti-LGBTQ messaging, just checking in on those people in your life is actually one of the most supportive things that you can do. I really believe this is a book about money and mental health and how those two things are connected more so than people realize. And then often having that nurturing environment and supporting people in that way, it's a
it's
small
great.
gesture that can make a really big difference and can help
It's
people out
great.
a lot.
Nick, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
And thank you for your book. Nick Wolny is the author of Money Proud, The Queer Guide to Generate Wealth, Slay Debt, and Build Good Habits to Secure Your Future.